Hello, and welcome to The Long Play. I'm Eleanor Shaw. Today we tell the story of Badfinger, a band that rose from a Welsh pop group called the Ivies to become one of the first acts signed to the Beatles' Apple Records, and whose bright, melodic songs helped define power pop. But this is also a story about money, mismanagement, and heartbreak. Over the next hour, about the next 10 to 15 minutes, we'll walk through their music, their ties to the Beatles, the deals that unravelled them, and the human cost that followed. With me are two guests, Martin Kellerman, who worked in London studios in the 1970s and watched label politics unfold, and Rachel Ortiz, a singer-songwriter and entertainment lawyer whose work bridges the creative and legal worlds. Martin, Rachel, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Eleanor. It's good to be here.
Thank you, Eleanor. Hi, everyone.
Let's start at the beginning. Martin, set the scene. Who were the Ivies and how did they become Badfinger?
Right. So the band started in Swansea, Wales in the early 60s. They were the Ivies, a tight little outfit, lots of harmonies, guitars, that British pop sensibility. They got around, gigged the clubs, recorded demos. By the late 60s, they'd cross paths with people connected to the Beatles, Mal Evans, Apple staff. It wasn't overnight fame, it was proximity and then a push. Paul McCartney liked them enough to write and produce a demo of Come and Get It for the film The Magic Christian. That one song was the foot in the door.
And that foot in the door mattered. Paul produced Come and Get It, which gave the band immediate credibility. Rachel, for a working musician today, how big was that kind of endorsement?
Oh, huge. I mean, Paul McCartney producing a song for you? That's like instant validation and visibility. For a young band, that means radio, touring opportunities, studio time at Abbey Road. But there's a flip side. Big shadows. Your identity can get wrapped up in that relationship. People expect Beatles-level results, and that pressure shifts how managers and labels behave. It can be a blessing and a trap.
They changed their name to Badfinger and released a string of songs that, they were gorgeous. Martin, take us through that creative peak. Albums and studios. Where were they working and with whom?
They essentially recorded in the big London studios, Abbey Road, EMI Studios, Olympic at times. Albums, as the Ivies, they put out Maybe Tomorrow in 1969. Then, under the Badfinger name on Apple, Magic Christian Music, No Dice, Straight Up, and Ass, 1970 through 1973. Paul had a hand, George Harrison produced some tracks and used Pete Ham and Tom Evans on All Things Must Pass and later the concert for Bangladesh. Todd Rundgren came in to produce too. You can hear the production polish, the vocals, the chiming guitars, the economy of great pop songwriting. Then in mid-70s they moved to Warner Bros. Albums like Badfinger, Wish You Were Here. Later there were records like Airwaves and Say No More and several archival releases. All told, about 8 studio albums under the Badfinger banner, not counting compilations.
And the hits, Come and Get It, No Matter What, Day After Day, Baby Blue, and, most famously, as songwriters, Pete Ham and Tom Evans co-wrote Without You, which became a monster for Harry Nilsson and later Mariah Carey.
Right. As a songwriter myself, I want to underline, publishing can be where the real lifelong money comes from. Without You is one of those songs. It should have been a financial fortress for Ham and Evans, but it didn't turn out that way, which is the painful part of this story.
Which brings us to the darker chapter. Martin, introduce Stan Polly and walk us through how management and contracts led to the band's financial collapse.
Stan Polly arrived in the picture as their manager. Charismatic, confident, and, importantly, somebody who said he could safeguard their money. He set up offshore companies and fiduciary structures he claimed would protect royalties and advances. But what he actually did was build control. The Warner Brothers deal had sizable advances and stipulations that money would be placed into escrow to be distributed to the band. Those funds, well, they went into accounts Poly or Poly-controlled entities controlled. When Warner Brothers discovered discrepancies or at least perceived mismanagement, they froze shipments, and the label ultimately pulled the album Wish You Were Here from distribution while litigation played out. The band, meanwhile, were touring, selling records, but not getting paid. They were on tiny allowances, and the finances were opaque. No clear accounting, legal fights, and nested companies that made it almost impossible for the musicians to trace what belonged to them.
So on paper, they were successful. In reality, they were often broke.
Exactly. It's one of those stories where sales reports looked healthy, but cash flow to the artists was strangled. The 1970s music business had lots of bright executives, but also loopholes and far fewer protections for artists compared to today. And managers, many of them, could exercise enormous control. If a manager decides to divert funds or bury accounting, artists were often the last to know.
Can I jump in? Because as a lawyer, I see echoes of this all the time. Poly structures were classic. Offshore entities, nominee accounts, promised protection that actually created distance between the band and their own income. If you're signing contracts and your manager insists on handling all the administration without independent counsel, that's a red flag. You need audit rights in publishing agreements. You need clear escrow arrangements. You need to know who the signatory on the bank account is. Bands back then didn't always have the knowledge or the resources to fight it.
Martin, you were in London during these years. What was the atmosphere like among studio people and label folks as the troubles started to surface?
It was a slow, souring atmosphere. Initially, there was the Beatles' sheen. You'd be excited to see a Badfinger session at Abbey Road. But when word got out about frozen accounts and the legal wrangling, people in A&R and the studios became careful. Labels don't like legal risk. Warner Bros. Was rightfully worried. Litigation is expensive, and distribution is a business decision. There was also stigma. Bands caught in financial scandal were seen as risky. So touring offers dried up and the band's public momentum stalled. And emotionally, it ate at them. Those tensions aren't just about money, they're about trust. Trust between a band and the people they place their careers in.
Which leads us to the personal toll. Rachel, could you take us through what happened to the members Pete Ham, Tom Evans, Mike Gibbons, Joey Molland?
Yes, this is the heaviest part. Pete Ham was the creative heart in many ways. Lead guitar, lead vocals, and a prolific songwriter. The revenue pressures, the lack of royalty payments, and the exhaustion of trying to fight legal battles while supporting a family pushed him into deep despair. In April 1975, he took his own life. The accounts I've seen reference a note that blamed Stan Poly. It's heartbreaking. Tom Evans tried to hold things together after Pete's death, keeping the music alive with various lineups and legal fights over publishing, especially because he and Pete were co-writers on Without You. But the strain accumulated. In 1983, Tom also died by suicide. Mike Gibbons moved into session work and led a quieter life. He struggled with seeing the band's financial realities, but stayed away from the headline fights. He died in 2005 from natural causes. Joey Molland passed away on March 1, 2025. He had continued performing, navigating decades of disputes over the Badfinger name and catalog. He was the most public surviving member, fighting for recognition and to keep the songs heard. It's a brutal ledger. Artistry rewarded in acclaim, but not in the security you would expect.
Those deaths are painfully real. We should say again, This is not sensationalism. It's a reflection of what happens when management fails and industry safeguards are absent.
Absolutely. And I want to emphasize something practical. In the 1970s, the mechanisms for artists to audit their managers or their publishing administrators weren't as standardized. Managers often claimed fiduciary duty but could dodge scrutiny with legal maneuvers. Today, we have more established norms, though not perfect, but back then, once money went offshore or into a private company, it was near impossible to recover without protracted litigation.
And litigation is expensive and long. Bands often have to choose between suing and trying to keep working. That choice costs time, energy, and mental health. The Badfinger story helps explain why modern artists are so focused on retaining publishing, getting split sheets signed, and doing regular royalty audits. A small admin fee to a reputable publishing administrator can protect decades of income.
Let's talk about the aftermath and the legacy. Did the families and surviving members ever see justice or royalty corrections? And how has Badfinger influenced music since?
Over the years, there were settlements, court decisions, and gradual recovery of some publishing revenue. It's a piecemeal process. The legal systems that handled these disputes eventually did redirect some funds back to families and surviving members, but it's been slow and partial. A notable cultural moment helped too, when Baby Blue appeared in the final episode of Breaking Bad in 2013. It brought a wave of renewed interest and streaming revenue. That spotlight translated into real money and renewed interest in the band's catalogue.
From a legal view, the story is also one of improvement. Now, songwriter rights are more aggressively protected. Performance rights organizations, global collecting societies, mechanical rights administration, these systems are better connected. But the lesson remains: keep your paperwork clean, get independent legal counsel, and don't let a single person control all the financial levers. Mechanically, artists should make sure publishing splits are registered, that they have audit and termination rights, and that managers are transparent. Mechanically, artists should make sure publishing splits are registered, that they have audit and termination rights, and that managers are transparent.
And musically, Badfinger's songs, tight melodies, heartbreaking harmonies, are the blueprint for power pop and influenced countless bands. No matter what, day after day, their sound is still vivid. Without You became a standard, earning huge royalties, in theory, if not always in practice, for the original writers. Pete and Tom's songwriting is taught in songwriting circles as an example of emotional directness married to melodic craft.
Yeah, bands from Big Star to more contemporary power pop groups point to Badfinger as a cornerstone. They translated the British invasion into a mature songwriting voice. Their records have aged beautifully because they weren't trendy. They were fundamentally well-written songs.
And the renewed attention means younger listeners are discovering them now, which is a kind of posthumous vindication. It doesn't undo the pain, but it does mean that the music isn't forgotten, and that matters.
We should answer the direct question many listeners will have: who survives from the classic lineup? Sadly, there are no surviving members. Joey Molland passed in 2025 and was the primary surviving member who continued to perform Badfinger material. Mike Gibbons passed in 2005. Pete Ham and Tom Evans died in 1975 and 1983, respectively. The landscape of rights and royalties has improved somewhat since then, and some funds did make it back to families and performers over a long period of legal wrangling.
And I'll add, Eleanor, it's important to remember that while legal fixes came, they were delayed. Many of the people who should have benefited most were already gone. That's the real tragedy: time. Money can be recovered too late.
Agreed. The modern takeaway for musicians is to treat the business seriously from day one. You can be an artist and a strategist, or at least surround yourself with trusted advisors and talk to peers. Split sheets, songwriting registrations, and publishing registrations aren't glamorous, but they're essential.
Before we close, let's acknowledge the human elements. Martin, one quick memory from the studio scene that captures the band.
I remember a session where the harmonies were just, smiles, perfect. They would stack vocal tracks and you'd think, this is a band that understands each other. There was warmth in the room. Listening back to those tapes, you can still hear the camaraderie. That's the part that makes the rest of the story so painful.
For me, as a songwriter, listening to Pete Ham's melodies and Tom's hooks, there's a vulnerability and an optimism. It reminds me why we do this work. Their craft still teaches writers today.
Thank you both. Badfinger's rise and fall is a cautionary tale and a tribute. Cautionary because of the structural failures that failed them, a tribute because the songs remain. If you'd like to dig deeper, we'll include a reading list of biographies and archival interviews in the episode notes. And please, if you love the music, support the legacy by buying official releases. It matters.
One last thing. If you're an artist listening, document everything. Keep copies of contracts, keep receipts, and insist on transparency. It can save you a career.
And don't be afraid to ask for legal help. It costs less than you think compared to what could be lost.
That's our episode on Badfinger. Their meteoric rise through Beatles' patronage, their creative peak in the early 70s, and the tragic financial collapse that cost them dearly. Thank you, Martin Kellerman and Rachel Ortiz, for your insights. And thank you, listeners, for joining us. I'm Eleanor Shaw. Take care of the music and each other. We'll see you next time on The Long Play. Please subscribe to Just the Facts Man YouTube channel.
Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.